this evening's agenda?
I'll make a motion.
I'll second in a second. Motion from Mark and a second from from Sherry. Sorry. All in favor?
Aye.
Great, thank you. Okay, and then minutes were emailed out, so everybody had a chance to review those. If there are no changes, can I get a motion to approve our minutes?
A motion to approve last month's minutes.
Thank you. A motion from Steve. Can I get a second?
I second.
And a second from Mark. And all in favor? Wonderful. I'd like to open now the floor to public comment. If any member of the community would like to speak, they will have up to 3 minutes. They'll be asked to provide their name and address. And we also, just so everybody knows, we've also added public comment cards that are like standard at the city council meetings and other meetings. And that way, if there's a comment that you'd like to make but you didn't want to speak tonight, you're welcome to do that and we can put that on the record. Would anybody from the community like to speak? Great, okay, well, if nobody would like to speak, then we will close public comment. And now, I'd like to introduce Clark Patterson Lee, who did our Parks and Recreation Master Plan. If that's okay. If that's okay. Yeah.
There, can I just scroll? I don't see arrows.
I think the space bar or the right arrow.
Thank you, sir. Well, first of all, thank you all for having us. We are with CPL, which most of you who have been around the community for a long time also know us as Clark Patterson Lee. We've been a part of Sugar Hill for a really long time on various projects, and excited to be selected to be a part of this project, which was the Parks and Recreation and Greenspace Master Plan. I will go ahead and introduce ourselves. So this is us. I will give the opportunity to Matt to kind of talk a little bit about himself and his background and expertise.
I'm a landscape architect. I graduated from Georgia in 1975, so I've been doing this almost 50 years. Can't believe that. But I do this because I love it. I love being a landscape architect. I joined Clark Patterson Lee about 7 years ago to work with him. I was the lead advisor and planner on this particular project.
And my name is Cindy Bonacci. I've been with CPL now for 5 years. My background is in Parks and Recreation. I've spent 25 years of my career working in Parks and Recreation. I'm a former director. It's kind of all I know. Started as a child in Parks and Rec and just kept going, never wanted it to end. So I had the opportunity of serving as project manager on this project and serving as a Parks and Recreation specialist, kind of being able to speak the same language with Andy a little bit throughout the project. So at the start of this project, we did have other team members involved, and about at the midpoint, Mac and I kind of took over leading and guiding the project through to the finish line. So our objectives, of course, was to develop and implement a new Parks, Recreation, and Greenspace Master Plan for the City of Sugar Hill Parks and Recreation Department. Our objective was to provide guidance for both short and long-term planning in the areas of park development and redevelopment, facilities maintenance, staffing and budgeting, land acquisition, green space preservation and conservation, athletics and quality of life programs, trails and greenway expansion, and passive and neighborhood parks. Our methodology to get us started, these are kind of our 4 go-tos anytime we're working on a plan such as this. What does the city currently have? That is represented in your inventory. We go out and evaluate current facilities, programs, organizational structure, locations, budget, identifying what we consider other inventory, which could be private entities in the community, county facilities and programs, HOAs, churches, things like that may also be in your community. So that tells us what you have. Then we get into the research phase and what do the citizens of the community actually want. So what do you have? What do you want? This constitutes community meetings, stakeholder interviews, surveys, meetings with staff, to collect a good bit of research moving forward. The third phase is, what does the city actually need? And that's where we get into the analysis. And we do something called a gap analysis, which Mac will kind of go into a little bit more into our presentation and talk about that, as well as a needs assessment. And then the last part that we look at are actual recommendations. What can be developed, repurposed, undertaken, and we provide that in a list format, and typically that comes along with some cost estimating as well, just for future planning purposes. Our master plan process, we start out with a community profile. You know, who is Sugar Hill? What does it represent? We look at the demographics. We look at any plans that have been developed in the last few years to kind of give us a baseline for starting working with the plan. Then we move into the community input, kind of what we mentioned, and then we move into the evaluation phase of everything that we've collected through the research phase. And then we actually identify benchmarks. So for the purpose of this study, we looked at things like NRPA, national and state standards. As we get into the gap analysis, and Matt kind of talked about establishing a baseline or establishing benchmarks, you know, we just want to reiterate that NRPA establishes a baseline, but we do not base our recommendations clearly off of what NRPA says a city of this size should have. Obviously, every city, every county is unique and different, and so we want to make sure we establish what we call a City of Sugar Hill standard from that baseline to work from. So, and then the last phase is developing the gap analysis and needs assessment, moving into the recommendations phase. Okay. What do you have? This is kind of what the inventory looks like. I know we sat down with Andy and extensively went through all of the inventory. He was provided a spreadsheet very similar to this that has all the inventory in it. It can be used by staff over time to update any additions to facilities, additions of playgrounds, trails, all those kinds of things that can be updated, or as things are taken out of the system, you know, those can be updated as well. So this is kind of what we use to kind of gauge what you have, but then we also provide it to the city for future use. In addition to this, we also looked at what I said, the other inventory, which could be churches, HOAs. We looked at county inventory. Obviously, when you're doing a plan like this, you don't want to have a duplication of services. Gwinnett County has a vast parks and recreation system. They're award-winning, and they're right at they're your neighbors. They're right next door. So it doesn't make sense to make recommendations to add things to your system that's already being provided by another entity in the community, such as Gwinnett County. So we looked at all of those when we looked at your inventory. What do you want? Survey input and data. So we interviewed stakeholders. Joe, who's one of our team members, sat down with stakeholders and did those interviews for us. We talked with staff, like I said, extensively, and then the city conducted a public input survey. At the completion of that survey, that data was provided to us for evaluation. So this just kind of are examples of kind of what some of those things look like. Obviously, those are some charts from the survey data, and then these are what we call tally sheets as we're recording kind of what was mentioned the most throughout that process. What do you want? Again, here are some tallies that we collected from the public input process, from stakeholder interviews and the public meetings that were held. So you can kind of see how things ranked and how consistent they were. And I will be very honest with you, regardless of where we've done these plans, whether it's city, county, rural, urban, doesn't matter. The number one thing that most people want are trails. I mean, that's consistent across every community. And it was no different here. So, Ben, what do you need? This is kind of where we start with the gap analysis, which can be very confusing. And I know even in our meetings, sometimes we're like, okay, what does this mean? And so we actually created kind of a different way to collect this data and make it understandable, not only for us as we're looking at it, but for staff, but also for the public to be able to understand. So typically these far right two columns aren't usually shown when we do the gap analysis. It's kind of inferred when we make our recommendations, but after talking with staff, because we don't want duplication of services here in Sugar Hill, we added these 2 columns, which I think gives a little bit more context as to why maybe something may have ranked high in the public input phase, but it's not shown as a City of Sugar Hill standard after we went through the needs assessment. So, and Mac will kind of elaborate a little bit more on that, but this can get really complicated, but you can see how we represent benchmarks based on NRPA. We show what Sugar Hill has, we show what standards should be and where you should be in the next 10 years. So, and again, if it is provided in the community, we listed actually who is providing it so that you don't have to duplicate that service.
Let me,
Sure, yeah, go ahead, jump in, Mac.
this column comes off the inventory.
Yeah.
And it's very, very long. It's got every kind of facility you could ever
Right,
imagine.
Andy? Yeah, it's very long.
And some of them you don't have, but
Yeah.
they were listed, so we didn't miss it. Then the NRPA standard, based on the size of your community, population, this is what the NRPA standard recommends that you should have. If you have nothing at all, this is what you're supposed to have. And then it's projected 10 years in advance, 2032. These are NRPA standards, and as she said, this is a benchmark. You gotta have some benchmark to start with, but that benchmark doesn't apply. Because Sugar Hill could be very different from a town up in upper state New York, where they play hockey, you don't play hockey. So, and those standards are in there, they're all in there. So then, this is your existing list of what y'all actually have. This is the Sugar Hill standard, which we went through and looked at what you have, what they say you need. We talked to Andy. We looked at, like, for example, this 10 or 15 basketball courts in this county park. Well, y'all don't need to build 10 basketball courts. Maybe you build 1. It says you need 5, but you don't need to build 5. Maybe you build 1. Those were judgment calls that we made. We looked at the swimming pool. There's a swimming pool on here. And we looked at all the HOAs. You know, almost a third of the people in your community have access to a private pool. Plus there are other pools in the community. So together we decided that's something that probably could be put off. That was a decision. That becomes a standard. So instead of the 1 that they say, it's a 0 for Sugar Hill. That's how we did that. This becomes a needs list, because we take the Sugar Hill standards and the NRPA standards and come up with the difference, and that yellow list becomes your recommendations list. This is the gap, that yellow is the need. It can be rather mind-boggling when you get into it, because Andy sat down with us and we went round and round on this. We also look at, once we make the list, and this is a copy partially of the list that we made, and the numbers of how many you need. Not how many you have, but how many more you need. If you're supposed to have 5 and you have 3, you need 2. And that's a needs list. The 3 green ones,
5, yeah.
5 green ones, I'm sorry. Those were the top 5 requests that came out of the survey. So we highlighted the top 5, so you would see those were the ones that everybody wanted. Not only do we say what, but where. We take a map of the city, we look at where your existing parks are, and then we say, where can we put these parks? Where can we put these facilities? And we look at every park. We distribute as much as we can on the existing property that the city already owns by putting them in parks and other places of property. And then there's this leftover list. The leftover list, we figure out how many acres it takes to build that leftover list. And that becomes the land acquisition piece. And you need 50 acres. You need to find 50 acres for these parks. Now, how the Riverlands fits into that, we kind of looked at the Riverlands a little different than y'all probably do. Y'all just looking at the Riverlands itself. We're looking at the entire city. So we said, what could we put on the Riverlands property so they don't have to go buy more property for these facilities that they need? And it's pretty obvious that the trails, passive park, anything that goes into a passive park, we put over there. So that now they've got plenty of land to do that with. That's still left over some stuff that we didn't have a home for. And we sort of left that as maybe it could, maybe it couldn't, we don't know. That's kind of what you folks are gonna have to figure out. That's part and parcel. So now when you're doing your master plan, you have a list of things that don't have a home, and you can consider them. And you also have a list of what we think you should put on the park, on the riverlands. But you don't necessarily have to accept that. It's just a recommendation based on what we know.
Matt, can I ask a question?
There's the land right there.
Can I ask a question? Can we go back to that last slide
Yeah,
for 1
sure.
second?
Well, I don't know,
Back,
Claire.
back
Oh,
arrow.
no, maybe not?
Back
Okay,
arrow.
we don't need it, it's fine.
Left arrow.
Okay, here we go.
So, on the highlighted needs, one is the gymnasium and the indoor basketball courts, and the other is the dog park.
Yes,
Are
those were on the top of the list.
Well, we have those, so are we saying that we need them in a different
We need
location?
more.
You need,
We
yeah,
need
but
more.
what you have is not sufficient
sufficient.
for your population.
Okay, that's what I was trying to figure out, okay,
You don't have 2 gyms. Recommendations, you need 3.
okay.
So one of them's on there,
Got it.
and we look for a home for that.
Are they ranked in priority or?
No, no.
Okay.
This is just a list, and he just highlighted
Okay.
them in order as they
Yeah.
pop up.
As they occurred on that other list, there were a lot of them that weren't there, so I just pulled off the ones that you needed and created a list. It's not alphabetical,
Yeah.
but it's a complete list from the needs assessment. Now, when you get the master plan book, you can go to this number 28, it says multi-purpose. There's a whole description in there of what that's supposed to be and where it should be and all that. But this is just a list.
Thank you.
Now, there's your 2 pieces of property. We looked at, we used this map to say, okay, I got that many acres, and we looked at how we walked out there. It's pretty uneven property, and it's very natural, it's got a lot of vegetation on it. So it needs to be, I spent my whole career being a site-sensitive designer, not bulldozing.
Yeah.
I believe that a design should be molded to fit the land, not bulldoze the land to fit the design.
Sure.
This property, it's an incredibly beautiful piece of property, and it needs very careful design and careful programming. We could turn the whole thing into apartments if you wanted to, but that's not what this should be.
No. Yeah, both of us grew up on farms, so we're very, we love the land.
We came up with some general recommendations on the North Riverlands. We think, and again, this is up to y'all, that first piece right on Georgia 20 should be a commercial tract, because it's very valuable, and that piece of property could very easily pay for a whole lot of other stuff, even pay for the land that you've already bought. So we think that should be a commercial tract of some kind. There are some recreational amenities we couldn't find a home for that need 30 to 50 acres somewhere. Maybe there's a place to put all or some on this property. Maybe they're mixed in with the commercial and something. That too is up to y'all. It should be a passive park, and the Sugar Hill Greenway is going through there, and it needs to be very carefully put through. South Riverlands or Orr's Ferry, a good trailhead for the NPS property, to access that property and to access the Greenway, your Sugar Hill Greenway that comes through there. Passive park with amenities, a one-way loop road, and what I want to describe is when I looked at that property, there's a big hill in the middle, the house on it. And rather than bulldoze a road up here in the parking lot, make a one-way road around the hill and back. So you don't have to clear very much to put it in, and then put parking along the road and put your bathrooms and your picnic tables and your picnic tables, so that people can drive in to get anything they want and then out. So it makes it work real smooth. That's me being a designer. Well, should have just been being a planner. But I think the house is a nice structure, a nice asset. Could be renovated for a community center, a garden center, a lot of different things. But I think it needs to have some use for the community. And of course, the Sugar Hill Greenway. These are very general. When you get the master plan, you'll see where we went in a lot more detail of suggestions of what we think those 2 pieces of property can be used for. And that,
Mike, do you want to talk a little bit about the pictures that you selected?
these
to
are
put on this
pictures of
slide?
projects I've done in the past. That one up in the far corner is a parking lot.
In the trees, parking lot.
Most people don't believe me when I say that's a parking lot. You have, I can't do parking lots like that in commercial areas because the property's too big. But you have a big piece of property. You can spread those cars out and not take out all the trees. We didn't take out anything but the underbrush to do that. That's a 300-car parking lot down at Callaway Gardens. So this trail is at Callaway Gardens, and we weaved it through the trees. This shelter was designed so that it looked like it belongs in the woods. It's not some prefabbed, ugly, painted thing sticking out in the middle of nowhere. That also is Callaway Gardens. So we turned it into a nature garden and a botanical garden. This bridge, I know you've seen a lot of pedestrian bridges, and to me there are nice ones and there's not so nice ones. This is one that we particularly designed as butcher block boards so that it's very thin. It goes right over a fern gully, and you feel like you're floating over it when you go out. Those are all designed to make it feel comfortable. When you ride your bicycle on there, you don't get that boom, 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 because the boards are this way, and you just sort of smooth and comfortable and you enjoy it. The rail itself, so you don't get your handlebars hung. That set of wooden steps, we just finished those in a park for Brookhaven. That's so we could build steps through the woods without cutting down all the trees and cutting all the roots to do it. Those are just kind of the philosophies and details that I've used my entire career that I would hope would be used in the actual development of the Riverlands property.
And
That was my soapbox.
Tell them a little bit, and we've talked about this a little bit, but years ago, we won't say how long ago, but Mac actually did one of the first studies for the Riverlands, starting up in Helen and going all the way to Columbus, down the Chattahoochee.
The Georgia DNR hired me in 1991 to study 300 miles of the Chattahoochee River from Helen to Columbus, and to develop a group of design standards for doing trails and parks and greenways and ecological areas. And that book has been published. You can get it through the DNR, and it comes right through here. And this was part of it. I also, 20 years ago, did the master plan for everything y'all doing down here downtown. It was Kevin and I did this master plan for Sugar Hill. Questions? Didn't mean to take too long.
Yeah, we were trying to stick to the schedule we were given,
That was
so
Very good. Very
Didn't-
good.
we don't want to get too far into the details.
Any of the authority members have any questions?
When you guys looked at that inventory, given the way our city limits are paint splatter as opposed to very contiguous and
No
logical looking, it's a mess. As you did that, did you just consider the population of the city, or was it more of a more enclosed area?
All right, we had two
We went back and forth for a while.
two challenges on that. The NRPA standards are written based on population within a city limit. Ownership of your parks is also, that's the only thing we can look at when we do an
Because
inventory.
you have control over that.
Because you have control over that. So the population inside the city limits, which looks like a jigsaw puzzle, is 25,000 plus. There's a gas service area that kind of encompasses that whole thing, and we looked at that. That's 50,000 or more. We don't really know for sure. We based it on the 25 because we know we have control over that. We don't have control over stuff outside the city limits. We then also, we know you have 3 county parks right in the middle of your city. Some of it you own the property, some of it the county owns the property. We looked at those separately so we could count what they have. You're right next door to the National Park Service, and you have caboodles of trails and stuff there. We counted that because your people go there. If it's inside the city limits, we counted it. We looked at all the HOAs to count how many pools are in the community. That was to help make a decision about whether we build a pool or not build a pool or that sort of thing. We looked at the schools because schools sometimes collaborate with parks and have joint use. You don't want to build a ball field if you're both using the one over at the school. We don't want to spend money where we don't have to. And we looked at churches because some churches also provide amenities. Playgrounds, basketball courts, baseball fields. We looked at all that and used that in the consideration of creating the Sugar Hill standard so that we don't spend your valuable money on building something that may not get used.
Are the items that you use to get the standard, is that what's there today?
You say
Is it there today, or was this done a while ago?
It was done last year.
last year?
The inventory, when we went out and counted every ball field, every trail, and every bench, that was done last year, put on that big spreadsheet, so we know what you have.
And then Andy checked it for us.
I've found out many times that a lot of parks departments don't even know what they all have.
A good example of that, Mark, is the dog park is now open. It wasn't when we were doing this, but we knew it was going to be, so we went ahead and added that we had a dog park.
Perfect.
The 9-hole disc golf course wasn't open. It's going to be here soon, but it wasn't when we did it, but we knew it, so we went ahead and added that in there as we had it already. So we
Whatever-
added a few of those independent items to it when we knew it was gonna be happening by the time.
Sure, they're
the end
coming
of the year was
online,
rolling
yeah.
around.
Even with the very best job you can do, it's still a little fluid.
Yeah.
Things still change periodically.
And these plans take time. So when you start a plan, if there's already capital improvement program in place and things are being implemented as we're doing the plan, we're trying to keep up. We're like, oh, you added that? Okay, we'll check that off. Oh, that's been added too, okay. So we
That's
try
why-
to, that's why we want Andy to look at it and when we're towards the end and say, Andy, make sure we've captured everything that's on the books, everything that's in place and everything that you know that's coming so that this is as real as possible.
And that's what's important about that spreadsheet. It's an Excel spreadsheet, it now belongs to the city. When they tear down a part, they just erase it. If they add one, they just add it. So they have a current inventory forever. All they have to do is just update it as things happen.
And they can change that baseline, obviously with the Sugar Hill standard, as things are implemented. Obviously that takes those deficiencies out of the equation because those needs have been met and added.
And if you do any annexation and you raise the number of people in your population, you go back to the standards and just change those numbers. It sorts itself out.
Would we have, this questionnaire, if we wanted to say we don't need another dog park? Settles Bridge, and I think that's considered Swanee, but it's right next door, so most of the citizens use that dog park. So I don't know if we would really need to add another one. That would then, we'd have 3 right in the little.
It's not so much how many you have, it's also
Where?
looking at where they are.
The one we added, we recommended down in the southwest corner of the property of the city. We tried to separate them. But now, as far as, it's a master plan. It's been given to the city. It hasn't been adopted by the city council yet, has it?
No, sir, not quite.
There will be a public meeting for that adoption. There'll be a time period where people can say, I don't like this, I do like this, add this, you forgot this, why didn't you do this? That's still there to happen. So we can't get this thing perfect if we work on it another 10 years.
We would try, but.
And the hardest part of this entire process is that what do you want?
Yeah.
Because everybody wants something different, and everybody has a different priority. Trying to corral that and get something that we can work with is the hardest part. Really is the hardest part of the process.
I think maybe the clarification on the question was the county park, Settles Bridge County Park, down by Riverside Elementary, was that dog park considered?
It was
Yes.
county.
Okay, I just
It was
wanted to,
county.
yeah, since we were making sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so we
There's a-
still need another one beyond that.
That inventory list you saw was strictly city parks, had the city parks listed. We got one for the county parks, we got one for the federal parks, we got one for the
We
state
needed 3
Mm-hmm.
total.
parks. So, and they're all in the master plan book.
Great.
You can see how far outside of the city we went with some of these details and how, some were way over here.
Yeah.
Some of our, Bogan Park, not really next door, but, it's there. So we went well outside the city limits to try to count as much as we could so that there's not a duplication of service and you aren't investing money into something that's already being provided in the community.
The purple is your city limits.
Yeah.
The yellow is your gas boundary. You see the difference?
Yes.
And so we went way outside the gas
Yeah.
boundary as
Yeah.
well, so, yeah.
There's a lot of people living in that gas boundary.
I'm gonna interject something real quick on Sherry and Denise's comments and questions. And this is to you guys. I know I'm not here all the time, and I don't know how many times you've been told this, but you're going through the process as we speak, all right? And there's gonna be things that are brought up that you personally may not like or agree with, because I can tell you I did. However, it's important to show exactly what can happen so that there's this conglomerate, this gigantic circle that everybody's putting green dots and red dots and yellow dots on like we did on our boards of what people want. Then it's the devious task of our mayor and council, who represent everyone, to kind of make that decision off of the recommendations. Some recommendations are going to be so high that it's going to be a no-brainer. Others are going to be so tough that it's going to be a very hard decision to make, and the decision might come down to we don't have enough land to do what it says we have to do. So it's a working document that you guys are going to be a part of performing and completing within a tough task of exactly what you want to do with the property. And in the long run, it matters what should go on the property, but not everything that should can.
Correct.
And so you got to keep that in your mind when you're looking at all these different graphs and numbers and ideas.
Yeah.
It's a very fluid situation that you guys have an incredible task to build this awesome Riverlands.
And this is what can, and what we feel comfortable can go on the property. But again, us being very site sensitive, very focused on nature preservation, we feel comfortable with these recommendations on this property. But at the end of the day, that is up to you guys. If you want to implement these recommendations, or you want to go a different route and feel like the property can be better served another way.
It's your property.
Yeah.
It's your property. There's also a supplemental report that's not given out to the public, only the city gets it. But it's a cost estimate of what it would take to build everything that was recommended on the first day.
I'll buy the lottery ticket.
Yeah.
Pray for Bitcoin to go up or something. So, and it's a huge number. So we then took it and prioritized it into 3 phases over 10 years. That's just our assumption. The city council will probably sit down with that and move things around.
Yeah.
But yeah, we had to, like you said, we had to look at things other than just, oh, we want a dog park, but where we gonna put it?
Yeah. And funding always comes into play when you're trying to prioritize these. We prioritize them based on everything that came out of the plan, but the city may look at that differently and say, this doesn't match up with our funding sources or our funding strategy for the next 5 years. These are gonna have to move around a little bit.
There's a flip side piece to that we often forget when you're designing a park like this, or any facility like this. You gotta operate it.
Yeah.
You gotta maintain it.
Yeah.
That was one of the things that made the aquatic center hard to accept, because it requires so much maintenance and so much staffing. The community center, if you decide to build one with a gym, that too is gonna require a big budget. Well, a dog park may not require much at all. So those things become factors that y'all play into it, but ultimately the city council has to make that final decision. They're responsible for balancing the budget.
And I will say, from our experience, a lot of the communities we go into are struggling in a lot of areas, but specifically with a maintenance backlog. Almost every city and county we work with have a huge maintenance backlog. And I will say, of all of the clients we've had, Sugar Hill is in the best place as far as maintaining their properties, utilizing staff to the best of their ability, budgeting adequately. You guys are doing a great job. Amy's doing a great job.
It wasn't as much deferred maintenance as we've seen in other places.
No, that was not. Usually we're trying to figure out, okay, how do they catch up? Like, how do we get them caught up? And that wasn't really a focus here.
So on the North Riverlands property, which is 90 acres, you're saying that 50 would be available for recreation track, and the other 40 is allotted into the commercial track, the passive park, and the greenway trail.
Well,
Approximately.
that's not exactly what it meant, and maybe I should have written it down.
That's what I want to understand.
You're close, you're very close.
What's left over in the inventory that we couldn't find a home for? And most of those are ball fields because they need flat ground.
And a facility.
And a facility, there's some other stuff. We calculated how much acreage it would take to just build that in a square. It's 30 to 50 acres. And what that means is, we're looking for 30 to 50 acres to do that kind of stuff on. is there some place inside the Riverlands where we can do 5, 10,
Okay.
whatever, even if it's just one.
Okay.
It keeps the city from having to go out and buy that land
Mhm.
in order to put that facility in.
Okay.
And that area of the community is deficient in some services.
We looked at, you know we needed land, so we looked around at what we thought were some good parcels that maybe the city should consider. But most of them are in the wrong place,
Yeah.
and very few of them are flat at all around there.
Yeah.
Riverlands is in the best location for a lot of these facilities, because it's on the west side where there's not a whole lot of amenities.
Mhm.
Any other questions from the authority members? Thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you, Andrew.
Hello.
Moving on with our agenda, Mark, do you have any updates from your Riverlands working group?
I do.
Great.
I do. At the last, this would have been, because we've missed a few, as busy as we've been, but the main things that have come out of the last meeting was perhaps the need for us to talk about, or talk to Gwinnett Trails, as well as the Chattahoochee National Park Conservancy. And Brittany Jones spoke, who's the executive director for the Chattahoochee National Park Conservancy at our last meeting, and she talked about their increasing responsibility currently. They're from Buford Dam to Peachtree Creek, which is 66 miles, and they're going to expand that down to, let's see, I think it was to 100 miles. So they're following almost the whole Chattahoochee Riverlands project. So basically that's at the 66 miles, that's 7,000 acres. That's 20% of Atlanta's Greenspace. And it's the 29th most visited park in the country. And even though it's more of a community national park, if you would want to say. And currently, if anybody's ever been to Island Ford South, which is the headquarters off Roberts Drive, they're doing a 2-mile project now that they have a little over $100,000 allocated into the plan, and it'll be about a $500,000 plan. So their focus is, how to enhance that area kind of to become a model, perhaps within, their own confines. And their goal is to feel connected to the park. They said that many people don't even know it's a national park, and we've all heard that before. As close as it is, people just think it's more of our Atlanta beautiful woods. So, so I guess the key take on that is just maybe the need to expand who it is that we're bringing into our conversation. So the National Park Conservancy is a very vital part that is should be a good partner with us. And let's see what else. And then with Gwinnett Trails, it's really more just keeping the lines of communication open, even though the property that we're talking about is more confined. And we know where our greenway is likely to go. It's not likely there's going to be another Gwinnett Trail that's going to duplicate what we do as a city. So, but it's still nice to have that open communication. So, anyway, that was those were the keys. There was some other side notes, but there has been much farther south of us. There's been a lot of E. coli issues, and a lot of events that were going to happen on the Chattahoochee have been postponed because of that. So there's a real push for infrastructure improvement on the Chattahoochee. So there's been a lot of paddling, a lot of camping, a lot of things like that that have been postponed this season. So, you know, we're blessed that we're upstream, but it is still part of our, you know, our concern that that's still happening so close to us. That's it.
Thank you. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Did, they say when they're gonna start their Allen Ford Robert project and when they would be done with
She
it?
didn't say. They've said they have $110,000 invested in the plan, so I think it's still in the planning stages. I will see if I can get an answer for you on that.
Be interesting to see. Anybody else have questions for them? Thank you, Mark, and thank you for sitting in on those meetings and bringing us all the information.
Certainly.
We have one order of new business tonight. So we're, being a relatively new authority, we realized that we needed to adopt some policies. One is for public comment, just writing out our public comment because we didn't have it in our bylaws or in our policy. And then one about meeting cancellation. So we had a member of the community express concern that they missed a meeting because it was canceled and he didn't know. So we wanted to make sure that everybody knew that we will, if a meeting needs to be canceled, it'll be 48 hours in advance. So you'll be able to check the city website by Monday and know if we had to cancel a meeting. So we, as an authority, are going to adopt those policies. Everybody has a copy of those, and I think I need a motion to adopt.
Is it for the whole article? Or just
For the
or separate?
for the whole article. Yeah. So can I get a motion to adopt? I guess it's Article 1, which includes the information about the meeting cancellations and the public comment.
I'll motion to adopt that.
Thank you, Sherry. And can I get a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. All in favor of adopting Article 1? Perfect. Thank you so much. All right, we are at the portion where we'll move around to director's comments, and we'll start with Mark.
Yeah, if I'm gonna just take a second and step back a little bit. You know, today's presentation was great, a lot of graphs and things like that, and a lot of numbers and really that's needed and a lot of analytical stuff. And we had the open houses where people came in and they you know, indicated the kinds of things they like to do. And it was really great that they came and they, you know, they took the time and so I had a chance to talk with, I don't know, when I went to the open houses, probably a couple dozen anyway, different people, and I would ask them, not specifically about what they wanted, but just the whole concept of the Riverlands. You know, what do you think of the Riverlands? And just leave it at that and see what they have to say. They came because they wanted to provide some input, so just to listen. So I kind of just wrote down, you know, afterwards the notes, and then over the last couple weeks I've been looking at them, and I came up with 6 different themes that people seem to talk about when they were at the open houses, beyond just the stickers and things. And I just thought it helps me kind of understand and put some, you know, background and maybe just get a pulse on what's going on. So I thought I'd share it with you guys as well. The first thing that was talked about by several people were the benefits of community engagement. And they felt parks in general were an effective way to, you know, build a sense of community, and that the Riverlands can be a place for people to connect and interact in a shared environment. I mean, it's a very positive thing to have those kinds of open spaces. They also had a sense that of the economic benefits that this could provide. Comments that came out about how property values could increase, and that home buyers are attracted. They think that to areas that have parks. I heard comments a couple of times that more people are working from home. And so they're more interested in things that are around their homes and their communities because they have more time and they can spend on that. And obviously, there was a couple retirees there that were interested in being able to do stuff like that. Children was another big thing that they talked about. That children can benefit from the experiences with nature and doing things with their family and their friends. And even more important with the growth of social media and digital devices and things like that, to get them out of the house and in nature and do that kind of stuff. Arts and cultural programs was another thing that came about. There were people interested in that with maybe some sculptures or statues and events and activities. Bringing people in, new people in from outside the area and their money. Whether it's fishermen, bird watchers, hikers, bikers. I do have to caution that there was a big concern over traffic. People talk about when this is going on, if we have this kind of thing, they're interested in traffic. But they were interested in smart growth, and density was a very concern of the number of things that are going on in Sugar Hill. And they saw this as a way to counteract that. It's a less dense area and that they could have more open space. So those are just the general themes that I picked up. And I know the numbers are great and we need to do that and all that. But just the whole concept, I was very encouraged by the people that came and the comments that they had, and was supportive of just the overall concept of moving forward.
Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you for asking.
Taylor, do you have anything?
No, all I want to do is say thanks to Andy and his team that have put together the master plan, and of course I appreciated the comments at the end of that about how well our parks are maintained, and that is all Andy, his staff, his team do that, get up every day. I am fortunate that I work at the East Center, so I get to interact with his team every day. Sometimes in small little conversations and sometimes in more deep conversations, and it's they are energetic and they are the hardest workers. They are out there working hard every day to maintain that standard that they talked about. And so, Andy, I'm glad you're here. Thank you for doing that. Thank you for putting together this master plan. I'm looking forward to it going up to City Council and us having that conversation as well about it, because it is much more than obviously than the Riverlands. If you got a chance to read it, it's on the city's website, and I know Claire started the Riverlands Master Plan website, which is fantastic. So there's a lot of good information on there. But I just want to say, since Andy's here, thank you so much for all you and your team do. Yes, thank you.
Steve?
I just want to echo it. You know, I think so highly of you guys because of all the things that I get involved with. But absolutely, you guys, you put us above everyone else. You guys are hard workers. I commend you again. That's all I have for today.
Thank you. Jerry?
It's a great presentation.
No, I think
Anything
it's gonna
else,
be a
Rob?
great tool for us to use, another thing for us to lean on to make our decisions.
So I just wanted to elaborate a little bit on, Taylor brought up a little bit about the new kind of website project plan for the Riverlands. So, Claire, you have the, perfect. So community, if you visit the city website, you can actually put right in the search box Riverlands, and it'll take you to this page now where we're going to be able to post information that we've already presented at our meetings so that you can find it again afterwards, or if there's someone who hasn't been at a community meeting, they can find the information. So there's a PDF of the boards from our open house that are there that kind of explain a lot of information. The KV advisory group PDF is on there so that you can reflect on that again and be able to access it whenever you want. So this new informational page should make things really, really transparent for everybody so that you can see what we're doing and not feel like you're missing something if you didn't get to come to a meeting. The other thing we realized that it's really hard to contact any of us. So we actually created an email address, and it is riverlands@cityofsugarhill.com, and it's up there too on that site. So if you have any questions that come up, you can link to that email and it'll go to staff and to the authority, and hopefully one of us will be able to answer your question, whether it's a staff person or an authority member. And that way, again, there's some more open communication between the authority and the community so that we can make sure that everybody's involved. And I think that's all I have. All right. Do we have a need for executive session tonight? Because not that I'm aware of. No? Okay, great. Well then, at this point, we've completed our meeting and we can call to adjourn. It is 6:20 p.m. Thank you all. Thank you everybody for coming. It was so nice to see so many members